Moving Fundraising Forward, a podcast on how to get the most out of your fundraising while building a stronger team. Today we're going to talk about key performance indicators with Jim Bocian, Robb Pike, and special guest JVMaloney.
Welcome back, everybody, for part 2.
I'm glad to be back, Robb.
As we all are.
We kind of left off on part 1 discussing, we got into some of the conversation around purpose of key performance indicators. And we began talking about a bit of the incentivizing KPIs and the advantages to a nonprofit organization to have both key performance indicators, but also, what are some of the conversations around incentivizing people in terms of those KPI measurements? And that could be in terms of giving an incentive, an at-risk incentive award, a bonus structure around that. It could just be public, acknowledgement of having achieved those key performance indicators. And I think too, are those things that are known outside the foundation? Do people outside the foundation understand that the development team has incentives to get them out of the office and go do development work, and that's why they're not there?
I think sometimes, and we've had this conversation at many levels at many other times, going back to culture, organizations, almost all non-for-profit organizations, even if they're huge hospital systems or large universities or anything, there is a culture, a shared culture for the most part, where people are inside the box. They are inside the building, and cultures do all sorts of things without having a KPI attached to it. A look, someone gives you the look. Must be nice to go out and have lunch with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wish I got paid for going and talking to people.
Wish I got paid to not have to hang around here all day. Those are the kinds of things that sooner or later, whether you know it's even happening, you find yourself back in the office. So there needs to be some kind of a metric that informs you and probably pats you on the back to be outside of the office doing particular things.
So put an incentive that ties directly to, I'm out of the office. I'm out of the office.
There has to be a value of some sort that's added to your regular value for doing certain things. At the end of the year, what they want to pat you on the back about is the money that comes in, because that's a language that all of them, that's a language every organization uses. How much money did we spend versus how much money did we bring in? How do fundraisers make money? They don't make it inside the building.
Yeah, all the customers are outside. They're pretty much the only group that lives in that world, other than maybe the CEO.
And that's where we were talking recently about, that's where abundance resides. Mm-hmm. Abundance resides outside. Mm-hmm. And the management of the inside is a scarcity mindset.
Now talk to us a little bit about incentives. And I think we've all seen incentives have as much harm as good.
Yes, they do.
So talk to us a little bit about incentives, both in just what's an incentive that helps them be out of the office, and then what are the metrics we're starting to say, okay, we're going to incentivize these, and what ways have you seen it gone well, what maybe you've seen it haven't gone well?
And incentivizing in terms of getting them out, it's also displacing work that they're probably used to doing inside the office. Mm-hmm. Who should I go see today?
Who should I go see today?
Yep.
Every person and every organization has habits. Almost everyone, when they go to work in the morning, get a cup of coffee. That's almost the first thing anyone does. That is one of the things we do as part of our workday, and we don't even know we're doing it.
Yep. Or tea. We don't want to leave out our tea drinkers.
Or tea. But the thing is that's the first thing we do, and then typically we'll make contact with our peers and our colleagues. How was the day? It's part of a culture. One of the things then that metrics can do is to begin to change some of those work habits by changing culture. And it's like that thing that they talk about. If you do something for 21 days,
mm-hmm. You'll change your habits. You'll change your habits.
21 days is a long time. It's a very long time. So those are the kinds of things that we want to be able to do, where we change habit, not by harping on people's behavior, but by giving them information that they own with you
So a little bit of,
and incentives come into that.
yep, stick or a carrot. You have to make a decision as a leader.
And it's to displace. What am I doing? The most comfortable place to be is in the office. That is culturally, it's the most comfortable place to be. Going out, one, you could go out the door and no one knows where you went or what you did. Number two, that needs to be measured. Both of those things, the numbers of times out. It's like going to the gym. If you want to lose some weight, one thing you need to do is before you start counting repetitions with certain weights, count the number of times you go to the gym. I mean, you're halfway home on that one. But those are the kinds of things that
Not the times that you think about going to the gym.
not the times that you think to, and there's always something that gets in the way. But those are the
Can we
things
pause
about.
around that?
Yeah,
And I don't know
That's
if I'm
very true.
I don't know if I'm quoting you or not, but there's a belief that good leaders know there's always a reason not to go fundraise.
Right.
Always. Because either internally or yourself, there's always something more fun to do for most people.
The hospital or the community foundation across the street,
Yep.
they're doing a campaign right now. It's not a good time for us to go out.
We can't compete.
We can't compete.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
We
wanna
may be
ta-
taking dollars away, or those dollars may be focused somewhere else right now. So it's not a good time for us to go do this.
Right.
And so if you incentivize them, this is where I want to dig a little deeper around how to incentivize them. So even if those blocks are there, internal or external, like, nope, we're going to get the reps in. We're going to go to the gym today.
Now this is a little abstract, but in the military, they don't get paid all that much. But one of the things that happens is a thing called honor. And here's an example. It could have been even 20 years ago. There was I think the chief of naval operations that's about as high as you can go in the company. He was challenged. He had a Purple Heart, and he was challenged by somebody who basically proved that he did not earn the Purple Heart. He killed himself. Now the point of that, and I don't mean to go dark, but the idea of being honored by other people, respected by other people, is as valuable an incentive as money. Money is a language. Honor and respect and prestige is also. So there's many things you can do to incentivize people that are beyond what the typical language is, which is money. Money counts, by the way. So
Sure, money counts.
I'm not saying don't do that, but that's one of the things to understand. What is it that makes people seek a reward, whatever that reward might be?
But it's an interesting point. If you watch organizations, and we're talking particularly around major gifts where you have to be out the door. If you watch organizations that do it well, you actually see that people celebrate
That's right.
people being out the door. And that's whether you're the CEO of the hospital or you're the administrative assistant, whoever you are, the entire organization has your back and actually celebrates you being out the door and doing visits. But it takes a while for people to say, oh, that's the important thing. That's the important thing. And when I say a while, you're talking 18 months because you have to beat up all that other bad habits.
But Rob, sometimes and we've seen it, bell ringing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a simple incentive.
It's a simple incentive. When the bell goes off,
Yeah.
out there somewhere, people know something good happened. And then they kind of gather everyone around and they say, this is what so-and-so just did. And then people get applauded.
Yeah.
There's no money attached to this, but there is honor.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to another conversation, which could be around the transparency and key incentive performance indicators. And it is, and I want to get your feeling on this, which is, do you feel that development officers should have not just a shared dashboard, but rather a transparent dashboard, so that if I go out and look to see how I'm performing, I can see how my fellow gift officers are performing as well. Could it be used as a motivator, or could it be used as a way to help build team structure and maybe partnering on certain opportunities? Just curious what your thoughts are on the transparency and key performance measurements.
We have talked many times about human nature trumps everything. It trumps org charts. It trumps money. It trumps everything. And when people are sharing their metrics, when they're sharing their numbers, and it now depends on how the leader frames this. And if the leader frames this, that this is something for us to know about one another, where anyone who's got good numbers is your friend, is your colleague. Figure out with that person what they're doing that you can get better by. Human nature doesn't always want to go there. Human nature becomes frightened and intimidated and threatened by numbers that are higher. So at that point, the executive becomes something more than a manager and has to become a coach, and that's a leadership task. But if it's done thoughtfully, Jim, you now have a self-learning organization from each other. That's about as good as you can get.
One, I think you actually mentioned several good points, but this is a point I think worth delving into a little bit further, which is incentive indicators give you the opportunity to move from the management position, which is how did you do, to being the coach, to how you're doing.
Right.
And I think that it
well
gives
said.
people a chance to have those conversations every week as they review them, every 2 weeks, to say, are you the right person with the right prospect? Do we need to have somebody else come in as a partner? If you are achieving, how can others learn from you, the
Yes.
things you're doing? These are learning opportunities for us. So I think what you're saying is that key incentive indicators allow you to have, if they're done properly,
Yes.
a coaching opportunity with your staff.
The metrics can drive an executive, and in this case, let's call it a chief development officer or the head of a foundation. Let's limit it to that group. Metrics can drive that person into becoming a scold, the school teacher, the person who scares you, and the person who, when they call you into the office to talk about your numbers, your mouth goes dry. As opposed to someone who becomes your coach, not necessarily your friend, because coaching isn't always the most pleasant moment. But on the other hand, it allows the person to coach with that what you were speaking about. What can I do to help you? Here's what I think I'm seeing. Am I missing something? Without it appearing that you're harming or frightening the person. It's very delicate, and I don't want to get too far from one thing. Everything we're talking about right now is not a cookbook. This is all about how to think about some things. There's no answer to any of this stuff. It's just all of that needs to be floating in your head.
And I like what you're saying, because you can have any metrics you want, but I think a key point that we have to focus on is if you don't own the story of all that data, you lose your team, right? Because we've all been trained since pre-K 12 school. If you don't get A's, you're in trouble, right? If you have the wrong answer, you're busted. So now we're putting their report card in front of them, which is their KPIs, and you can have two stories, but they're always going to follow the story of the boss. So if the boss is saying, here's the story, and we use these to have your back, we use these to coach you up, how can I help? It works. If you don't put that story, or you share a different story, it doesn't. You can't hide from the need of the story. Even if you don't say anything, they're going to hear I'm going to get beat up on this. Right. And if you say you're going to beat them up, it's actually probably easier on them, because then they know.
Yeah, then they know. They're waiting for the shoe to fall.
Yeah, but I knew it, but now I really know it. So at least I can control some decisions.
Yeah.
And it takes a while, but I think I really like how you're talking about you have to own that safe space for them. I do want to talk about this one. Let's talk money and incentives. Mm-hmm. Right, we can talk, and I think you actually get more value all over with non-financial, but let's talk about financial, because I've seen a lot of people try it, and it's a whole different world compared to the for-profit and nonprofit, and how we feel about this dynamic. So talk to me about how you think about financial incentives for good performance.
We'll go back to vocabulary. Vocabulary really matters. In popular vocabulary, instead of it being an incentive reward, it's called an at risk, that your compensation is at risk. In other words, this is the number where I think you're going to go, and if you don't do these things, you will receive less. As opposed to, here's what your salary is, and these are the things that can make things better for you. So there is that issue. Again, it's a matter of vocabulary. And it needs to be broken in pieces as opposed to all on and all off. By that, I mean, let's count the number of times you leave the office and actually spend time with, not like at a football game or something, but you're spending time with your true important prospects. That's a piece that needs to be incented in some way, because you've got to be in their company.
Incentivizing you being out of the office.
With them.
With them.
With them.
Yep.
Then the other is, what is the number, or not is, another thing may be, how many times did you actually present the opportunity and ask for the order?
Yep.
That's a second thing.
Because they can control those.
You
It's
can
a lot of
control-
work. but
You can
control
control
I'm
those.
so glad you mentioned that, Rob,
Yeah.
because that's one of the things that often does get talked about, which is key incentive indicators should be things that the development officer has control of.
Yes.
Right.
You know, they have the opportunity to be able to succeed or not. And so, please.
Yeah, because here's the biggest thing people have to realize if you're not in fundraising. When you're asking someone to give, it's not your decision. It's not your money. So I can visit with everybody in the world. I can make a bunch of asks, and I do the right.
But
And
you've
do
done
it.
all the right
But
things.
I've done all the right
You can
things.
do all the
and
right-
I'm
you-
a great
and that should be
employee,
incented.
and that should be incentivized.
You can shoot the puck perfectly. It may not go in, but that once it leaves the stick,
Yeah,
you,
and just
you
if
pretty much
anybody's
done your job.
listening and knowing, Jay here's a huge hockey fan, so it's always pucks
Right.
and shots on
It's
goal.
always shoot the puck. It's always shoot the puck. One of the other things too is that so here's the coach moment. The coach calls you in and says, "Let's talk about it," and we do it regularly. We don't do it like once a quarter. We do it regularly. It needs to be part of our regular conversation, so that it doesn't become this fearful moment.
Yep.
The quarterly report card is coming out, but it needs to be part of our day-to-day conversation. And then along the way, you could say, one thing I'm looking at here, and Jim, going back to your point about everybody looking at everyone's numbers, and I'm just going to make an example here, but the numbers of visits you're making is down, and why? Tell me about that. What can I do to help? Now, here's what you might say, if you feel safe. The person assuming you have a slightly larger development office, the person whose job it is to get me in the door is not as effective as the person whose job it is to get Jim in the door. That person has maybe a style or maybe some methods on how to deal with resistance.
Yep.
That person is as much a part of your sales team, of your development team, as the other development officers.
Yep.
So now what we have to talk about is, what can we do, one, to maybe put some technical skills on your partner, or two, get you another partner, or three, find something else for that partner to do. But that's the kind of thing that can only be revealed through a conversation that's free and open. And it's not maybe your fault, because if the prospects are saying no to the meeting,
Yep.
Everything else can't happen.
Yeah, you're going to have a hard time hitting any goal.
But again, the thing then is, everyone needs to be safe that there's no punishment here, because what you may be inclined to do is say, boy, my assistant is fabulous, and I don't want to put my assistant under the bus.
I want to tell you, it's not punishment. There is an accounting, and if the attitude isn't there, it's hard to coach anybody. But for those that are coachable, that's the right conversation, because there's no punishment. It's an investment.
And often it's the lack of confidence in how to make the ask. So I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on building confidence in development staff, either through training or through actual case scenarios where you sit with team members and role play. What's it like to make an ask?
Boy, that's so good. Like one thing from one of our earlier conversations is, one thing that we all sometimes need to do is to inform the person we're having dinner with that we're changing the channel right now. And a lot of people don't. It's a very simple technique, which is, do you mind if I put on my development? Thanks for dinner.
Yeah.
I had more fun tonight than I ever knew what to do with. Do you mind if I put my development officer hat on, because I know there's things that we do want to talk about. Very simple. A coach, a boss as coach, can help with that by saying, sometimes you just have to make up a story that back in the day I used to do this.
Yeah.
Even though maybe you didn't. But on the other hand, then it's also a matter of modeling. Why don't let's go out together, just, not necessarily, you don't have to copy me, but get a feel for what we're doing.
I'm going to tag onto that to key performance indicators. You can put down metrics all you want around how many asks you made, about how many visits you've done. But you as a leader, if you don't do ride-alongs,
Yeah.
those are data points that really you can't coach around. I mean, you could, but you have to do the ride-along to see how they interact with people, to see what they're thinking, and then modeling.
Yeah.
and giving them the words. You take I make these many asks, and now I'm confident that I know how to ask. I can do twice as many asks this month.
Storytelling, back to human nature. When people are corrected, whether you like it or not, you can get a little defensive about it. So one of the things that you can do as a coach is tell a story. It can either be something that I did back in the day, or I knew some guy did the exact same thing you were doing, and he figured it out by doing this. Has nothing to do with you, but it has to do with some other person, and there's coaching. I don't want to lose a particular thought, but when it comes to people who are coachable, one thing to look for is people who have actually been on an organized sports team. It can be in high school or college. They don't need to have done really well. Or people who have been in the performing arts where they actually have had to perform in front
Under
of other
direction.
people, under the direction of someone, and they had an understanding of the relationship between the coach or the director and themselves. I think a case can be made for the Army or the military, but there's something a little more direct, there's a little something more direct there. But those are the kinds of things about the person who is coachable without being fearful. And sometimes they just say, you need a little further on those skis. Just try that. In fact, watch me when I do it.
And you used a framework before, because when we're doing metrics, there's a question of what's a high enough bar, what's too low of a bar. You use a framework that I think is transformational when you use it, because it allows for everybody to start controlling their own destiny within it. And it's simply this: good, better, best.
Yes.
Here's the KPIs that are good. And good is you're welcome to always stay on this team because you're valuable. Better is a lot better than good. And best is aspirational. So you can take anybody and really kind of transform them. What have you seen?
Well, from the leading indicator perspective, absolutely. There's also the lagging piece, which is the revenue generating piece, which is that good could be budget.
Yes.
That's what we need to achieve.
Yep.
Or better could be that plus 10%, and best could be that plus 20%. So that you can take here's what we need to achieve, to the more aspirational, to let's not make it the wish list, but is it obtainable 20% above what we're anticipating doing?
Because the human dynamic, once you hit the incentive, why would you do more?
Right.
And good, better, best says, no, we can get an incentive so crazy. I know this, that my best players will never slow down. Which, on a side note, I would just caution anybody in the nonprofit, if you're going to use money to incentivize, you can't put a top on it. I would always rather do an early salary bump and do more of those for good work.
Well, talk a bit more about that. When you say don't put a top on it, do you mean in
Sure, I
terms
actually
of
learned this in the for-profit sector. So in the for-profit sector, right? If you're on a commission and they top you out, then I'm going to be smart. And if I'm really good at what I do, I can actually work maybe 2 weeks out of an entire month and hit my maximum money incentive. At that point, I'm pushing all my other asks, all my other clients down the road. And what you basically do is you put saddles on your best Mustangs, and you want to make sure you're not doing that. The hard part for nonprofits is sometimes it's a hard case to make in philanthropy, that you're getting bonuses for every dollar coming in.
And one way that you can apply a metric that allows that continuation of great work is adding time to your outcomes. So in other words, I need to see so many people and identify that that's a prospect, add a time period to it. And after a certain period of time, I need to do the next thing. I need to keep continually stepping through this so that it's not a 5-year engagement, it's a 6-month engagement from start to finish. And once I'm done with that person, you go back and you refill my pool of who those prospects are to continue on.
Because time is a...
Otherwise, you do get that. I could do all this stuff in 3 months, like we've done by August.
And go read the paper for the rest of the year. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're still going to get a pat on the back and you're going to get a paycheck. One of the things, too, by implication, there is always the debate about percentage of gifts. There's the code of ethics. And what you're not doing by incenting percentage towards overall goal, it's different than paying a piece of the action. A piece of the action is very dangerous. Never when it causes people to lie, It causes people
Yep.
it,
To
not,
fight.
It doesn't necessarily cause it, but it can, and it's risky. It can cause. The first person we lie to in this world is ourselves.
Yep.
And if we put a big enough incentive award, we will allow people to begin to lie to themselves about what they're doing, and they're not truthful anymore. And so the thing, one of the things about, we don't give you know this and I know this, but I just want to make sure you know this too, which is that we're not saying you get a piece of the action. What we're saying that there's a budget. You hit something a little while ago, Rob. Everyone talks about stretch goals, right? Everyone's got a stretch goal. This year we have a stretch goal of X.
It may be coming from the outside.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
from
where did that
leadership
even come
too.
from? Well, it came
Yeah.
from the finance people, or
Who
it
have
came from
this-
my CEO,
Yep.
or it came
Who
from somewhere.
waved their
Yes.
hand and anointed a goal upon us.
And it's a cliche.
Yeah.
We're going to have a stretch goal this year. And with that said, the implication is a stretch goal is not always achievable. It has to do with putting your best effort in, getting the most, but there's our aspiration. So back to the thing about good, better, best. Assuming we have a stretch goal, maybe that needs to be in the better zone. And a percentage below that can be good. And say, these are the things we really think we can do.
Yeah.
This one is this one is our stretch. Over this thing, I don't know how to say thank you. We'll find a way.
Yeah.
But that needs to. And earlier on, we were saying this is not a cookbook. This is stuff to think about.
Yeah, let me check on one more thing here on this. So the idea of team incentive versus individual incentive.
Yes.
And the dynamic is whether you've given me a prospect or not, it's not my prospect as a
Yes.
staffer, it's the organization's prospect. And the minute we start doing individual goals, that goes right out the door.
Yeah.
Or individual incentives that aren't attached to a team incentive. Let me clarify.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah.
key part. I
Yeah.
think it's individual incentives that are attached to a team incentive.
Yes.
And I think that what works well too is incentivizing the organization, not actually the individual gift officer, but
Yes.
rather everybody who helps support that gift officer. I know that's quite an effort for some organizations, but it's almost like the Super Bowl. Everybody gets a ring.
Yeah.
The people that help fold those towels to the
Yeah.
people that help, whatever aspects of the team stretching, the medics, whatever it may be, the people supporting. They all
the
get a
prospect
ring.
researcher,
Yeah.
the visit getter.
Yeah, and that just inspires others to want to say, hey, let me see what I can find. Let me see what I can bring to the table. Let me help you make that call to get that door open for you, so you can spend more time doing what you do best from the administrative operational perspective. So
We were talking to Jim a little while ago about pieces, putting your incentive program into pieces. One of the pieces would be, let's pretend we're the 3 development officers, Mo, Curly, and Larry. And what we've been told is that we have each of us, these are the numbers, and we've agreed to, I've agreed to mine, you've agreed to yours, you've agreed to yours. And then you're doing really well. If we had another piece to this, which is the number that we share, that our number is good, better, best. The aspirational piece is in there, and there's more to the reward, whatever it is. There's a piece of reward that comes to each of us for what we do, and there's a piece of incentive that comes to us for what we do. And at that point, even if I've hit mine, I'm still vested in the behavior of the group.
I'm here to help the team.
Because there's something in it for me. That may be not the only. Some of us may be very altruistic, and I just want the team to win because I love teams. That's good. But on the other hand, if we had 2 pieces, one is yours and mine, and the second piece is ours. Just think about it. Just be careful what you do in terms of what you're incenting, because sometimes you can fracture your team.
Yes.
and you want to create a collaborative team.
And you don't want that because they're not going to like each other.
Yeah, they're not going to like each other.
And that's never good.
And the other thing just around incentives is the end result of fundraising having so much to do with not the fundraiser. If you have a team and all three of, well, if it's our team,
Right.
And all of a sudden we look at Jim, and Jim's like, Jim, you're meeting with a bunch of multimillionaires and billionaires.
Yes, Rob. I
Right?
am,
Well
yes.
done. And we're meeting with people that their best gift is $10,000, right? And every
Yeah.
gift is good. How do we redeploy to maximize for the organization? And if I'm Jim and we're all incentive individually, Jim's like, are you nuts? These are my prospects. You'll never touch them.
Rob,
Well, and it's not. They're not.
They're not your
They're
prospects.
the organizations.
But if you
Yeah.
incentivize around that,
Yes.
people will act that way, and they'll do everything. That person's not going to give for 5 years, when you know they will
there
tomorrow.
are
if you ask
so
them.
many contradictions in what you're talking about, Rob. This. So now pretend that you're the chief development officer, and you have assessed both the skill levels and the effectiveness of everyone on your team. And let's say then you got a Jim over there who's just better than everyone. Bear with me on this. Do you spread out the prospects to be fair, or do you focus the prospects to where the money's going to come from? And how do you work that through when people ask you that question? Because now you've got that other pressure, which is I'm accountable for the money that comes in the door, and I have a pretty good idea where 80% of it comes from.
Yep.
And it's Jim. And so am I going to give Mo and Curly an equal number of the best prospects simply to be fair? Or am I going to focus it where the money is? It's a cultural question.
Yep.
And it's
Because the fact is
and it's
easy. The
full
facts
of-
are
it's
easy.
full
Jim,
of
what do you
sna-
need?
It's full of snakes.
But
It
the
is just
culture
full of
says,
snakes.
wait a minute, am I going to lose these people? Is it ethically okay for me to do this? So
Well, and I think that goes to two, which is you've got annual and sustaining giving programs, mid-level giving programs that have slightly different incentive structures
yes.
than the major gift officer is going to have with the
Great
$1 million
point.
prospects.
Great point.
I'm going to be out seeing 10 people potentially,
Yes.
where you're seeing 100, and you're seeing them in different ways. Whether it may not necessarily always be one-on-one, it may be through annual solicitation type efforts.
Yes.
phone
But-
calls, first visits, that kind of
Exactly.
thing.
So I'm going to have different structures in place. But what I like is that it presents the opportunity for people with the indicators and being transparent about that, having those coaching opportunities to work with people who may be working with somebody who's at a $5,000, $10,000 ask or opportunity, who's engaged them in conversation that sees the potential impact of a much larger gift here, where they can bring in the major gift officer to have that dialogue.
Right.
Yes.
And one supports the other to support the organization, not if you're working as a team towards more of the team related incentivized structures.
And I think I know we got to wrap here in a second. The one thing I like to monitor is the culture just around they're not my prospects, they're the organization's prospects.
Yeah, they're not my friends.
They're not,
They are.
They can be friendly, and I can be have a friendship, but my first role
Yeah.
is always this. But they're not my prospects.
I
They're
am,
the
I am an
organization's.
agent of the organization.
Yes.
Right.
So I'd love to get your kind of takeaway on this. What would be your chief bit of advice to anybody, I would say, that's new in the industry or has been doing this for as long as we all have, about how to start something like this or what to look for in terms of their key performance indicators or any key takeaway you may have?
First of all, I would make sure so I'm going to pretend I'm the executive, to answer your question. I would gather around me the people who are going to be incentive in that bundle. There's the annual giving bundle people, and there's the major giving. So I would get the people who are in that bundle, and I would spend as much time as I could to describe and to discuss the why behind this, what it is and what it's not, until the body language began to move my way. But so I would do that, and then also talk about the numbers that I am presenting and why I am presenting them, and do they still make sense to the people who will have to do the work? And then I would listen to what they have to say, and I would find, this is nothing to brainstorm. Do not brainstorm your incentive numbers.
Yeah, not in front of anybody.
Don't do that. Come in and know what you're talking about
Yeah.
and why you're doing it, but then listen, when you can tweak a little here and tweak a little there to the point that everyone begins to own these numbers, then it becomes something other than the teacher and becoming a scold. And that takes time. That takes time. But among the things to say, that one thing is that you want to do is to begin to build and break certain habits. To say part of it has to do with changing our habits. That's a good reason to have numbers, not just I want to please finance.
Yeah.
So that might be a start point.
And I want to echo on I think you own this really well. If they're your key performance indicators and you're the executive, it doesn't really matter if they're not mine and I have to do the work.
Right.
So we have to get to that place where it's shared ownership over them, but I have to own them and know why I'm owning them. And that takes a time, especially for young professionals who come in like, yeah, I'll do it. I get it. And we know they don't get it.
Yeah,
no,
they don't
I didn't get it.
Right.
For
They
years.
just want to, they're new. They don't want to lose the job. Probably it's a better job than they had before, has a lot of value to them, and they're new. And they want to be compliant because we talked a couple of sessions ago that the most fundraisers are pleaser personalities, and you need to be careful about that.
Well said.
I would just add as a key takeaway is that not to have too many indicators. I think that it confuses people on what it is to be successful. Which one of these things do I need to do to be successful? And to help narrow that a bit more, even to weight those indicators for the chief development officer to help lay out which are the most important things by weighting numerically which one of those things are the highest priority for organizations. Seeing people is a high priority. Getting things turned around in a certain period of time may not be as high a priority, but the ask, in other words, it's getting out and it's a relationship. So I want to thank you again,
Thank you, Jay.
Mr. Maloney,
Thank you
for being a part of today's episode on Key Performance Indicators. Rob, we also want to say if you have any questions or comments or future ideas, please reach out to us at info@movingfundraisingforward.com.
And as a reminder, ask your questions as minute or off the crazy line that you might think it is. Our business is weird. And, there's times I had a great question. There's a meeting, and where do I sit? That's a great question.
Do you sit across or do you sit next to them?
Do you sit next to them, and why, and how are they going to
Yeah.
move their neck? So just know there's people that are going to be at this table like you that they've thought about these questions. So ask them.
Wonderful.
And Jim, if I can add one final thing, which is to go back to the earlier point, these are only things to think about. Everything we discussed in here and that we've been discussing, it has nothing to do with a cookbook. This has to do with just the things to think about relative to the people you're working with, relative to your boss, relative to the culture of the organization, relative to your finance people, relative to your board members. Just think about it and do your best.
And do your best. Well said.
Thank you so much.
This podcast is brought to you by Cause and Solution Inc. and Peak Coaching and Training Solutions Inc. For more information, visit our website at causeandsolution.com. And as always, thank you for listening.